So I'm going to talk to you about how to regulate water in the body. We just went through a whole bunch of examples of how hormones work. But I want to do this one in depth, primarily because it's on the syllabus and it says I have to. But as we've discussed, water is essential to surviving. Water is essential to, especially for terrestrial organisms. We have to keep the right amount of water in our bodies at all times. You will notice during the day that you need to pee. Yeah, it happens. Concentrating waste in urine is one of our major adaptations for surviving on land, along with desiccation-resistant skin. But there's only a limited amount of water in the environment, and we're especially seeing that like in the West right now. So whatever our body can do to hold on to water, knowing that we have to urinate to remove waste is going to be important. We will always, as humans, have some waste of water with our urine. Other organisms have gotten around that. We haven't. We have to concentrate urine. So let's talk about how water works in some other organisms, and then really focusing on us. So to prevent cells from crenating or lysing. So crenation is where they shrivel up, lysing is where they pop. So water leaves too much and you create a little raisin cell, or water floods in and that cell pops open. You need to maintain the amount of level in the cell, the amount of levels of water in the cell. Ideally, the cell will be in an isotonic solution. The same amount of solute on the outside as the inside, but that can't always happen. So remember, hypotonic. You put a cell in a hypotonic solution, pure water. Water will flood into the cell and the cell will pop. Lyse. Hypertonic solution, you put it in salt water. Water will leave the cell heading toward the salt and the cell will shrivel up. The ideal solution would be isotonic, where there's equal amounts of solute outside and inside the cell. Water's constantly moving in both directions, the cell does not change size. In order to maintain, or try to maintain that tonicity, we've got two big mechanisms. You could be an osmoconformer or an osmoregulator. Osmoconformers are typically marine organisms that change their osmolarity to match their surroundings. That is, they change the amount of solute in their cells to match what's happening around them. Versus an osmoregulator. They're going to maintain their internal osmolarity regardless of the environment, and that's you. Your cells need to have a set osmolarity surrounding them. Other organisms don't. Yes?
Is osmolarity kind of equivalent to like a salinity level?
Yes. Sorry, I use words sometimes and forget. So osmolarity, if you were to think of, back to Bio 101, you guys talked about the osmolarity of the potato. You did a whole experiment to figure out what is the solute concentration on the inside of the potato compared to the outside of the potato. Osmolarity is where you have a set amount of solute in the cell. So, saltwater organisms. What's the problem with saltwater organisms? They're living literally in a hypertonic solution all the freaking time. So saltwater organisms, typically, if they didn't have some sort of coping mechanism, their cells would all shrivel up. It'd be like taking, I don't know, a dead fish and throwing it in salt. That preserves the fish because it removes all the water. A fish that's osmoregulatory, that is, maintains its internal salt conditions, is going to take in a huge amount of seawater. Constantly drinking seawater. Well, what happens if you guys drink seawater? You get dehydrated. Why? Because you're taking in so much salt. What they do is they take in all of this salt water, and then they expel the salt crystals through their gills. So basically, they're taking in a lot of water and getting rid of as much salt as they can. Then they use their urine to rid themselves of excess salt. Just like you use urine to get rid of excess amino acids. So basically, take in a huge amount of water and then pump it out with through your gills, the salt through your gills. Freshwater fish, on the other hand, they got just the opposite problem. They're living in a hypotonic solution. Water is constantly flooding into their cells. These guys rarely drink. They're surrounded by water, but they never drink any of it. And to follow up, they are constantly peeing. If you're in a freshwater situation, and you guys might notice this if you were to like go to a pool or somewhere that's got a freshwater lake, you'll find that you need to pee a lot more often because your cells are filling with water and your body's trying to process that water to get rid of it. If you don't believe me, trust me, go to a lake, sit in the lake for a while. Even if you had nothing else to drink, you will feel like you have to pee. I don't recommend you do this, but fish will then constantly pee while they're in the lake. You probably shouldn't. People will notice. It's very dilute urine, though. It's not like it's very thick. Land animals, we use and lose water through a lot of different processes. One is urination, another sweat. We're one of those animals that can sweat, as you guys know. And as we sweat, we lose a lot of water. If you notice after you go for a run or something, you're probably going to weigh less if you've been sweating because you've lost all of that weight in water. Breathing, we lose water when we breathe. If you were to sort of blow on your hand or breathe on your hand, you'll feel that it's moist. You lose water through breathing. You get water through drinking, obviously, and also eating moist foods. This is a great picture. I love these because it's always like, look, there's a butterfly and a turtle and they love each other. What the butterfly is doing is drinking the tears of the turtle. Literally, that's what it's doing. Turtle doesn't particularly like it. I guess there's not much going on, but now whenever you see a butterfly landing on something, it's usually there for a reason, not because it's enjoying the perch. The reason is drinking. In animals like you and me, ammonia builds up very, very quickly due to the breakdown of proteins and nucleic acids. You have to take in certain chemicals into your body to survive. You cannot make them. As those are broken down, they produce waste products that you can't do anything with. You have to get rid of them. If you let them sit for too long, they will build up to toxic levels. You have to remove them from your system. And the way you do that is by using water to dilute it and then excrete it in urine. So you've got these, you guys know proteins, amino acids, and things are important. You need the basic building blocks. But there are some of these that you cannot use well, so your body has to expel them. Think urea, which goes on to become uric acid. That's in your urine. That's where it comes from. So you're going to build it up, and then you're going to excrete it to get it out before it becomes toxic and stops cellular respiration. A lot of animals have what are called transport epithelia. So these are tubes that are connected to their external environment. Think of, no, there's nothing really to think of. Think of a tube connected to the external environment. It looks sort of like this. You've got a membrane, and then a tube running into that membrane. That membrane is semi-permeable. What does it mean to be semi-permeable? Right, some stuff goes in, others have to stay in. So what ends up happening is waste will be able to move in and out of that tube through that membrane. But those things that you need to survive stay inside. Proteins, cells, things like that that can't escape through the membrane, that's called the filtrate. It's been filtered. So you keep useful molecules like water and glucose, they get reabsorbed, they get pulled back in through active transport. So you're using water to push these wastes out, and then actively you're going to take back in water. You use pumps and ATP. That means that that solution surrounding these epithelial tubes becomes very, very highly concentrated waste that you need to get rid of. It's best if you're dumping these tubes into a central tube that then becomes think of it like a sewer pipe. If you got a whole bunch of tubes spilling into one area, sorry that you can hardly see, in here, in the central area, you end up getting a lot of that filtrate that then can be processed for removal. It just dumps out. So this is probably in the animal kingdom. It's first seen in the flatworms. You guys remember these guys, the planarians? Their tubes work a little bit, basically the tubes work the same way, except they connect instead of to a central tube to the external environment. They are constantly leaving behind a whole bunch of materials. This works super well because they live in water, so they don't have to reabsorb water. It's already all around them. They don't need to actively bring it back in. They don't need to conserve any filtrate. Does that make sense? Basically, these guys can waste water as much as they want because they're living in water. There's always more to bring it back in. Insects, they're going to pass filtrate into their digestive system. So now we're talking about that colon and everything. Here the solutes and the water are reabsorbed. So you push your waste into a tube, and you're going to reabsorb the water through active transport. That means that what leaves an insect is very, very solid. So they've got extremely efficient system for pulling water back into the organism. They conserve water a lot. Vertebrates like you and I, we're going to use our kidneys in order to for osmoregulation. The kidney is made the same way as the insect and the same way as the flatworm. Same process. You got a whole bunch of tubes. Those tubes are going to be used for filtration and pump into a central, think of it as a waste tube, the ureter. So you got all of these tubes in the center. They're filtering waste. They pump it into the middle. That waste will then be sent down to the bladder. Make sense? And we do that to conserve water because we're filtering and reabsorbing. The kidneys concentrate urine up to 4 times the osmolarity of the blood. So basically, you're using active transport to push as much waste as possible into that so that you don't have to have a constant stream of pee as you walk along. You hold it and you release it when you need to. The higher the concentration of waste products, the more water you're conserving. Once it's filtered, it passes from the kidney to the bladder, and then it's held there until it needs to be released. Make sense? And that's going to be, for adults like us, it's going to be in a voluntary muscle control. When you're younger, you don't have that voluntary muscle control. You haven't built up that muscle yet. So that's why kids who are young have to wear diapers, because they can't control when they release their bladder. You guys, on the other hand, I hope can. And that is the water conservation. Basically, big picture, we've got different types of, we have to conserve water because we're animals. Certain marine animals can be osmoregulators, where they're going to match their osmolarity to the environment. But most terrestrial animals and even a lot of animals that live in freshwater are going to be osmoregulators. They have to internally maintain the amount of water in their system. They can do that through pumping out or pumping in water. Urine is going to be a major way of controlling how much water is present in the body. Too much urination, and you end up dehydrating and dying. Questions? In fact, that actually was a major way of people dying, especially royalty dying, was literally dehydrating from excreting too much.